Well, yeah, that brings us to, well, tonight's subject is, tonight's topic is the topic of, internet conspiracy theories, which are widely derided, and conspiracy theories are, one of the reasons why certain states at the moment are, it's one of the reasons offered that certain states are trying to implement programs of controlling the internet and censoring the internet because of the supposed violent, crazy tendencies of people who run conspiracy websites and the people who look at them. Now, admittedly, there's a lot of odd things. Now, there's a whole lot of speculation on YouTube videos and websites and radio interviews and podcasts about a kind of twilight zone of reptilians. Reptilians, human beings, people in power, elites being in fact half lizard, half man, and this sort of lizard nature comes out in secret moments, candid moments. I mean, that particular idea was, it was in a famous, or a whole bunch of movies in the 80s and 90s, and television series like B, about alien visitors who visited Earth and had spaceships hovering above the Earth, and they were really, in fact, they looked humanoid, but they're in fact reptiles, and they ate humans, but it's, it goes back a long way. There's a whole lot of things on the internet about, reptilian bloodlines, and, black nobility, or secret nobility, secret elites, and that sort of thing. Now, there's this idea, the Bible, for example, has some very, at points, very obscure, very hard to understand, enigmatic verses that constantly, like on websites, get picked on or quoted or advanced as evidence for this kind of interpretation of the cosmology and of the cosmos. And there's a famous verse in Genesis about after Adam and Eve, and human beings were growing numerous, and they at some point, you see, there's a verse which says the sons of the gods noticed that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they went into them, and they gave birth, and these children were the Nephilim, the men of renown. This is such a obscure verse because, who are the Beni Elohim anyway? Elohim is, anyway, as far as philology goes, Elohim is a very, it's used in a lot of different senses in the Hebrew Bible and the sons of Elohim. Anyway, there is this idea borrowed from paganism. It's often found in Greek, certainly in Greek pagan writings, this concept of theology. Now, you have like a beautiful maiden in the woods, and a god comes down in some form of desirable form, and meets her, in private, and they have a sexual union, and this gives rise to the birth of a magical child who's half man, half god, and Greek mythology is, packed with that stuff. Hercules, Perseus and even like famous people like Alexander the Great had a whole body of mythology about him, about his mother's union with a snake or something. Anyway, I mean, by the way, I mean there's this whole parallel universe of mythological sort of stories about Alexander the Great, and there's this parallel universe of like normal quotidian stories, like I mean the story about how Philip of Macedon had lost his eye because he was peering into his wife's bedroom while she was having a sexual union with the god in the form of a serpent or something. But there's also the fact that he lost his eye in the siege of a city in Greece on the coast near Thebes, but can't remember. But there's this idea of theogony in paganism, and which people try to read the Nephilim verse in Genesis in that light. But also borrowed from paganism, there's this idea of autochthony. Autochthony is where this is the idea of Aboriginal tribes on the earth rising from the soil naturally. Like in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, in the movie, they had the orcs, you remember in the film, sort of sprang, they were sort of birthed, they were in a womb in the earth. And so this is an example of, I mean, Tolkien was into all kinds of stuff, but anyway, this autochthonous birth is another thing from paganism. Now, we can't ignore the concept of innate notions, innate ideas, because like in Plato had this idea that a child was born, say, and all, say, if he was a mathematician, all the mathematical theorems and things he would do in his life were innately in him already. And so Plato, so if you have some, it's a bit silly because you have some mathematician sitting around with a group of axioms deducing theorems. They're not bringing out what's from inside them. They're just doing a process that they've taught, logical deduction. But we've got, there's all kinds of ideas posited, genetic memories, like, generation after generation has dramatic experiences, and this is somehow, imprinted in their genes, and you can somehow, recover these memories, and also in paganism, you have the idea of past lives. I mean, you have these generations, human beings are born, they die, they're reincarnated, and so cycle after cycle, and you have these you have genetic memories. You have like past lives, and a therapist can help you recover what's in your subconscious, perhaps. But one question to be asked about the whole. See, this was John Locke's ideas on. John Locke's he argued that there's no such thing as innate notions, and there can be no concept of, no possibility of innate ideas. And a good question to be asked is, if ideas are innate, why do we in fact need education? I mean, if ideas, I mean, is education teaching children ways of thinking, or is it just bringing out some kind of beautiful thing that's in them already? I mean, and furthermore, we come to a logical fallacy of the social genetic conflation, where you have a social group, a tribe, a religious group, a cult, a subculture. They go to schools and they have meetings and they learn. Children learn. They're educated in the way that the group wishes them to be educated, and they have habits of thought, of mind, and they come up with. They have like Russians have a particular Russian habit of thought and Russian ideas and Russian concerns, and Japanese have Japanese habits of mind and a Japanese education and a Japanese outlook. But it's a bit silly to say, therefore, that a particular outlook, a state of mind, is peculiar to a genetic type. I mean, that's an error that's often made when people, loosely speaking, saying he's very French, or typical American or something. Because I mean, you can take someone. I mean, for example, Australia. It's a nation of immigrants, and they have genetic types from all over the world. But there's an Australian identity, an Australian outlook, an Australian, Australian way of thinking, an Australian habit of mind. So, just because a group teaches its children generation after generation certain ways of thinking, it's a mistake to say that this is therefore a genetically engendered point of view.